you are stepping into a world of breaking boundaries. It is time to write our own story. Are you ready not to learn something, but to change something? Or everything?
So this is how Slush Singapore kicked off earlier this year in September. And this was our core message to our audience, to change something. And this is actually the message that I hope that you will take away as well. And this is something that I would encourage all of you to do as well. My name is Ratala. I'm the head of Slush Singapore. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about how do you create an experience and engage your audience beyond the traditional ways. Later on, I'm going to be talking about some of the very concrete examples of how Slush Singapore has actually done that, how we have changed everything that you know about events, and what has been the reaction to that. But before that, let's set some concept, right? Many of you that are perhaps in the events industry, maybe you organize conferences or events or meetups, you probably think you're very unique. You probably think that you're different, right? Like your event is different. There might be tens or hundreds of thousands of events in your industry, but you probably think, no, we're different. Well, you're not. Here's the newsflash. You're really not. This is something that a lot of events organizers like to think, but you know what? Well, we have better speakers than somebody else, or we have more attendees than somebody else, or we have better food than somebody else. But it's all same, really. You're not that different. And being different is just something quite subjective. But let's think about something that is a little bit more objective, because every one of us that work in the events industry, we face the same challenge. And that challenge is competition. But it's not competition from other events. It's competition for your attendees' time. Because essentially what we're doing is we're competing with our attendees' time. We're asking them to come to our events and our conferences and our meetups, and we ask them to spend time there instead of doing something else. We are essentially competing against piles of emails, against meetings, against all that work that these attendees will be doing the day after, and maybe doing overtime because they spend time at your conference, right? We're competing against deadlines and sometimes even against people's free time. So if we ask people to spend hours and sometimes even days at our events, we better show them some damn value, right? But how do we do that? We know that, if people come to an event and they, meet someone that gives them business, they meet a new client, or they meet someone that invests in them, or they meet a partner, or maybe they meet somebody that they want to hire, that's great. But the problem is we don't have control over what happens after the event. We don't know if these things take place. We don't know, and very often people don't come and tell us. And even if they did, right, like if somebody ends up recruiting, for example, a new candidate that they met at an event, very seldom do they think that it's because of the event, right? They just thought that they were at the right place at the right time. So we don't have control over what happens after the event. So what do we do to create that value? Well, we can create experience and we can create engagement. Those are the two things that people can experience at the event itself and that we all have a control over, right? But how do we actually do that? So there are two ways to make sure that we create that experience and create that engagement. I'm going to talk more about the other one, something that we at Slush Singapore do and that I'm a very big fan of. But let's take a look at the first way, right? Which is very straightforward. It's based on feedback, right? I mean, all of us probably send out surveys after the events. I'm not sure how much people actually answer. Our reply rates are not very high. But you can do that, right? So we do at Slush Singapore, we do a lot of legwork. We pick up the phone, we call people, our attendees and speakers and partners and so on. But the key is here. there are only two types of feedbacks that you should really care about: the people who love you and people who hate you. Nobody in between, right? If somebody's like, okay lah, like it wasn't too bad, don't care about them, right? If you ask for 1 to 5 for them to rate the experience, they're 3, ignore them, because they're never going to help you to make your experience better. So what you need to do is take a look at these two, right? The ones that love you, they're your ambassadors, they're your cheerleaders, they really love, they're like, you're nailing it. And more than anything, they're really going to be your PR machines, right? However, they're not really going to help you to improve the experience. They're just validating what you're doing correctly, which is why the ones that hate the event or have a very unpleasant experience are very key, right? And we need to learn to love them, right? So people that are saying, oh, you know what, I really dislike this, I hate it, this was so bad, I'm never coming back, this is horrible, right? And then you can do two things. So one, you take a look at, okay, if their feedback, what they disliked was something valuable. For example, if they say, okay, I queued for 45 minutes to get my badge. Ouch, that's pretty bad, right? That's not very good. Maybe you should change that. Or if they said, oh, I couldn't flush any of the toilets, right? Like, okay, that's too bad. So maybe you want to actually improve that experience. But then there's the kind of feedback that's very subjective, right? For example, with Slush Singapore, every single year, people come to us and they say, why is it so dark? Right? Our event is very, very dark. We don't have any lights on. It's very cozy. And like, why so dark? I can't see anybody's badge. I can't write. Like, why don't you turn up some lights already? And we say, okay, thank you. Never. We're not going to do that. We're going to own it. This is the kind of feedback you might hate, but we want to own it, right? It's not something fundamental. We want to be known for something like that. So essentially, because when people have a strong opinion, they remember, right? So learning from these kinds of feedbacks from the lovers and the haters is one way to create the experience and create the engagement. But what I'm really more interested about is the second way, and this is how we do it at Slush Singapore. Challenge yourself before others do. Challenge yourself before others do. And I'm not sure if you can see the photo. It actually doesn't really reflect very well on the screen here, but that's Slush in Helsinki a couple of years ago. There's fire on stage, real fire on stage at an event of 20,000 people, right? Challenge yourself before others do. And for you to be able to do that, you actually need to change a lot of things and you need to take a lot of risks, right? I love this quote. I don't remember who was it by, but I know that it's been put in the mouths of a lot of visionaries and leaders. But here's the quote. The best way to predict the future is to create it. So challenge yourself before others do. That's the only way how you can actually create the future, right? If you're in the events business and you're thinking about right now going paperless with your tickets, right? Like, you're late. Like, you're not challenging yourself. You're a dinosaur. You should have been doing that 5 years ago, right? 10 years ago. So do things that really gives you an advantage of doing things differently. But what that means is you have to take risks. And not all of them are going to pay off. It's very difficult to say, hey, we have a really nice functioning, our average on the feedback form is like 3.8. It's okay, like we're doing pretty well. Don't settle for that. And what I want to talk about next is I want to give you some very concrete examples of what we have done with Slush Singapore for our different, target audiences. What were some of the things that we challenged ourselves with, and what was the feedback? But before I jump into that, I wanted to ask you guys, how many here is familiar with Slush? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, not everybody. So just really quickly, we are actually a tech startup event in traditional terms, but really more than that, we're a catalyst. So we were originated in Finland 11 years ago as a very grounds-up movement of young people, students, entrepreneurs, and doers that wanted to come together and they wanted to make stuff happen. They wanted to create a gathering that looked like them and felt like them, and they wanted to talk about entrepreneurship and technology, maybe have some beers and party a little bit. And the first time that Slush was actually put together was 300 people, very organically, very from the grounds up. Fast forward 11 years, 20,000 people from all over the world fly to Helsinki at the end of November which is the worst time to go to the Nordics weather-wise. But people fly down there, investors, startups, media, corporates. Last year, Al Gore was there to open Slush in Helsinki. So it's really become this huge event, very well-known event in the tech space, but the fundamentals have remained the same. It's to help the next generation of world-conquering entrepreneurs forward, and the way how it's done, it's still a non-for-profit organization, and it still works with a lot of volunteers. So in Helsinki, we had 2,500 volunteers that came to put together the event. Very grounds up, very different. And these are some of the photos from Slush events around the world. So a few years ago, Slush started making waves in Asia. So there's one in Tokyo, one in Shanghai, and we have been organizing Slush in Singapore since 2016. And again, in the very same way, grounds up, we work with, this year we worked with 200 volunteers. We had close to 3,000 attendees, and boy, we do things quite differently. So in 2016, when we started this, and when we organized Slush Singapore for the first time, people came to the event and they were like, what the hell? So it was dark. We played, so in the morning when people came in, we had like this 360 immersive experience that people walked by and they were kind of transforming into a new world, right? So it was dark. We played some club music. They were like, what the hell? It's 10 a.m. in the morning. Where are we? We had a huge opening show. We had a lot of TED-style talks. All our booths of exhibitors and startups were made out of wooden pallets, so they didn't really look anything like anywhere else. And we had a massive after party. We offered some beers. We danced on the stage, and a lot of people stayed, and they were like, wow. We've never seen anything like this before. We created a paradigm shift in terms of how tech startup events were looking like. Well, now, of course, a couple of years after that, you go to any events, tech events, startup events, and you start to see some same elements. They're getting darker. There are some opening shows. There's some after parties. A lot of them are really, raving about working with volunteers and so on. So there's a lot of slushified events in the region. And that's a good thing, right? I mean, it helps the ecosystem. It's fantastic. It's also quite flattering to know that we've started a movement of this sort. But that also meant that we had to think, how do we challenge ourselves before others do? Because essentially, attendees don't care who came up with something first. What they care about, the experience, the engagement, right? They care about getting the value for that time. So we started thinking about, okay, here are some of our target audience in target groups. How do we challenge each and every one of them? So I'm going to tell you some examples, and they're quite interesting. So firstly, just in terms of the, so this is how our event looked like this year. This is our Startup Alley. Basically, in terms of the general audience, right, first of all, we showed that video that I showed in the beginning, right, really asking people to not to come and learn something. That's what you do at the traditional conference. You come, you listen to wise people on stage, you try to learn something. We're like, no, we don't want you to learn something. We want you to change something. We want you to feel the action, that fire in the belly. We want something to happen. And we really challenge them to do that, to think about that throughout the whole day, right? One of the interesting things that we did was we took our event, because there's a lot of convention centers in the city center of Singapore. We took our event to Jurong East, right? And those of you in Singapore, they're like, whoa, that's far. That's like 20 minutes from the city center. That's really far in the Singapore context. And that was the feedback that we got from a lot of people when we first released it. People were like, whoa, like that, like you go so far, and like what's there? But for us, it was great because we didn't want to be in a traditional convention center. They're boring and everybody's there, and it's very difficult to create that underground vibe. So we decided that instead of listening to that feedback and trying to explain, we're just going to own it. So what we did, because it was at Jurong East, we basically did a limited edition of EasyLink cards that said, change something or everything, and our logo, and we sent them to all our Singapore-based speakers with a letter explaining that sustainability is a big value for us, which is true, it's always been, and we said, hey, you know what, this year you can have a chance to come to our venue with an MRT. It's super easy, here's a card, please use it, be the change maker, show example. And unfortunately, I don't have really statistics of how many use the cards, but at least they could keep the cards. And we had a lot of positive feedback on that. And then they say, hey, this is really cool, and it's really well thought of. So we completely owned it. Another thing that we did was with regards to startups, right? So there are tons of pitch competitions going on. I mean, even in Singapore, probably every single week you'll find one. And they're all different, right? Like, oh, our prize is bigger, we have this cool judge, or we had the most applications, but we all know that it's kind of same, and we were quite tired of them. So we decided to challenge startups a little bit, and I'm going to show you a video of how we did that. This was before our event, so it was like one of the pre-campaigns, but this is basically what we asked the startups to do.
Unlocking the potential of wastewater while turning waste into work. To be envisionable, it's not enough to do repairable like they have, and we're building our launch vehicle.
So it was pitch, the world's first pitch at GMAX Swing. And I have to say that this was the most popular campaign we have ever done with Slush Singapore during the 3 years that we've been existing here. People were sharing that, they were giving us so much feedbacks and high fives and whatnot, and it really went viral in the startup community. This was a way to challenge the existing pitch competitions for us, right? So something else interesting, we wanted to challenge our speakers, of course, right? We wanted to make sure that when our attendees come to an event, they should not just passively listen and scroll through their Facebook, they should actually engage, and they should get something out of it, and that also benefits, of course, the speaker. So instead of just accepting everybody and everybody's topics and so on, we sent all our speakers a buzzword ban list. These are the words that we told them not to use in any of their presentations. Why? Because when you go to different events, you actually hear people talk about these buzzwords all the time. Innovation, we're disrupting AI, the future is here, the future of tomorrow is created by innovations of today. Like, what does that even mean? We wanted them to go beyond these buzzwords. And again, we published that on social media as well, and people went nuts. Like, they were like, oh my God, this is so great, you should add these words. And even the speakers really, really loved it. There was one blockchain speaker that named his presentation Decentralization Without the Buzzwords. Now, he didn't use the blockchain because we asked him not to. But this is one of the ways how we were very brave, saying, hey, we know you're our speaker, we respect you, but we want to challenge you a little bit because we believe that you get the most out of it like that. Another thing that we did with our partners, right? This is maybe not so visible, but it was very important for us. We had numerous companies reach out to us saying, how much would a speaking slot cost? And we said, they're not for sale. And for us, it was a very, very big thing to do. As a non-for-profit organization, we struggle all the time with cash flow. For us to turn down money because of our principle was a very difficult thing to do, but we did it. Because we've all listened to sponsored talks, and 99% of them are very boring, and they're just sales pitches, and nobody gains any value out of that, also not the speaker. So we told them that rather than that, we just want them to come and engage our audience in different other ways. So we organized helped them to organize some workshops, pre-events, side events, and so on. Another thing that we did, this is with our exhibitors, and this is actually quite interesting because this is the one that we got the most pushback for. So we had an exhibition area, but this year what we decided to do was we did not offer a booth to any of our exhibitors, we just offered them the space. And we said, please come and create whatever you want in that particular space, up to you. And they were like, what do you mean? Like, what's the booth? Like, what are you going to provide us? We said, nothing. We provide you the audience and the people and the opportunity, and you decide how you want your space to look like, because we want it to reflect you. We don't want you to be a clone of 15 other exhibitors that are there. And oh boy, that was really hard because a lot of people went, oh, but you know what? But then I have to spend extra money building the booth. I said, no, you don't have to build a booth. In fact, don't build a booth. Do something else. Yeah, but you still have to build something. No, you don't have to build anything. You can put hammocks and you can put plants. You can do a bubble bath. You can ask people to walk on fire, whatever it is that you want to do that reflects your company. And it was really tough. And I have to say that there were some companies that decided not to come because they just felt, so the money was one thing, but really most, the biggest pushback, the biggest reason for the companies that did not end up coming was because they felt that they did not have the time to put the effort in planning all this. And they were like, well, then why are you even coming? If you don't want to put any resources and thought into planning for your visibility at our event, then what are you trying to gain? Like, is it just a tick in the box? Then maybe you shouldn't be there. I mean, we didn't say in these words, but that's really what we implied. And I have to say that this year, honestly speaking, we did have less exhibitors than what we've had before, but we're really proud of the ones that were there. This is actually the city of Helsinki, and as you can see, you don't see any booths right out there. Like, you don't see anything. Last year, actually, they had an ice bar, a bar out of ice, no booth, right? And that's how we actually came up with the whole idea that we should challenge everybody to do something a little bit different. Finally, here's our whole Slush Singapore team and our volunteers. We didn't just want to challenge everybody else. We wanted to challenge ourselves as well. And this is something that we really incorporate in the way how we run things. So we have a very lean team. We have 10 people that are more or less full-time, and everybody else is volunteers. So what we do with our volunteers, who are mainly students, we give them a lot of responsibility. And we ask them to get involved as early as possible. So if somebody says, hey, I want to be a part of the marketing team, and wouldn't it be cool if we did this and that? We say, okay, sure, go ahead and do it. And they're like, what do you mean? But I don't have any experience. And we're like, well, neither do we. It's your idea. Why don't you go and try to do that? And it has taken a little bit of time for them to understand that they can actually do that. They can actually take responsibility. They don't have to come and ask me about every single decision. They can actually roll with that. Another interesting thing that we do with our own full-time team, right? I mean, we work on a daily basis to put together the event. We don't have any office hours. Like, nobody's in the office at 9 a.m. for sure. Nobody leaves at 6, or maybe they leave at 7, maybe they leave at 4, right? They can work from wherever, whenever, as long as they get the stuff done. We don't have any holiday policy. You want to go for a week-long holiday? Please, go ahead, right? We have deadlines coming up anyways. We have a lot of pre-activations. We have the event. So you need to know what you need to get done. Whether you are sitting somewhere on the beaches of Phuket and doing that, I don't care, as long as you do it. And that has actually allowed us to hire a very diverse group of people. For example, we have quite a few students, yet occasionally they had to attend classes. That was fine, right? We have people with small children, and they sometimes have to attend to things with them. That's fine, right? So that it's really allowed us to utilize a lot of the very, very smart talent, and it's worked tremendously well. But it is based on trust, and it is based on mutual respect with the team. So here are some of the things that we have done at Slush Singapore to, challenge ourselves before others do, and hope that you learn something. But essentially, it always is getting out of your comfort zone. It is always taking a risk, and sometimes it pays off, and sometimes it doesn't. But the next time, before you think about a cool slogan, how you're different than somebody else, or you think about your ticket price, why don't you first ask yourself, are you ready to challenge yourself? Are you ready to change something or everything? Thank you.